Hey there, once again, another edition of the Five-Star Podcast of Wrestling underway. I'm your host, Sean Meyers, joined by my co-host, Justin Lowery. After a busy night, he is taking some time to talk about the world of professional wrestling. And Justin, before we get into some of the more specific aspects of Raw and SmackDown, as well as a big change to WrestleMania weekend, I think the biggest news where we have to start, at least in my estimation, is Raw this past week. I think probably suffering from the prior week show, had the worst rating in the history dating back to when the show began, January 1993. I thought the show was a little better, but isn't this more a reflection of the previous weeks and how bad they were that people really just aren't tuning in to watch the show from the get-go at this point?
I think it's just a reflection on the whole product in general. It's not like one bad episode, does that. It's a consistency of a lot of bad episodes through the last couple of months. It's just absolutely sucking. And you made the point that it was a little bit better, which it probably was, but you just basically, you got a little bit better from what most people say is the worst episode ever of Raw. And that includes everything in the mid-90s, where a lot of people will say that was WWE's worst era of wrestling.
And I had mentioned it's the worst one that I remember thinking like the whole way through, this is really, really bad. I've actually gone to a Raw that was just brutal. It was actually, I think, the last Raw at the Civic Arena, if you will. So that's probably, about 8 years ago at this point. But this one, it was just, it's just a culmination of, like you said, weeks of bad television. So when you have a show that bad and word gets out, there was no positive reviews to be found anywhere online. People, hey, I'm not even going to watch next week. And I think we saw that reflected. It's going to take a lot of work, I think, at this point to get the ratings back up to a respectable level, isn't it?
You would think it's going to not be like next week they can come out and have the best episode ever, but that's not going to do. You got to follow it up. There's no reason to tune in. I've expressed on the show how I'm barely watching Raw.
And a guy like Brock Lesnar doesn't get you to tune in, right?
I watched a total of 30 minutes out of 3 hours on Monday. So that's what I did. And if you miss an episode or two, you don't miss anything. You can read what happened, and you don't feel like, oh man, I can't believe I missed that. Like, back in the day, you couldn't miss because you didn't know what was going to happen. Now it's very, everything's it's just the same old. There's no surprises. I can tell you how it's going to go, and apparently, once again, Raw was rewrote at 3:30, 4:30 in the afternoon, and no one knew what they were doing once again until like an hour before the show. And Vince rewrote it. I guess you can't take it off of Vince, but somebody really needs to get the writing off of Vince because Vince is completely out of touch.
I remember you and I are very similar in age, so you're talking maybe junior high, high school. You had to watch wrestling on Monday, or to a lesser extent, the secondary show, whether it be Thursday night or whatever, because you go in that next day. Now, admittedly, there wasn't, Twitter and stuff like that, but if you didn't watch, you'd be left out in all the conversation. Now, I don't know for sure what high school kids or junior high kids are talking about, but I'm willing to bet it has been cut down, exponentially in terms of talking about WWE product the next day.
Yeah, I feel like, I graduated high school in '04. So the Monday Night Wars ended in 2001. So for me, like junior high, middle school, junior high, wrestling was cool. Like, everybody watched wrestling because it was cool. I don't think wrestling's cool anymore. I don't think high school kids, junior high kids are talking about wrestling. Like, I coach a high school baseball team. Trust me, they're not watching wrestling. They'd be like, oh yeah, I watched that when I was 10. And then I turned like 12 and I stopped. Like, that's basically, you hit, as soon as you hit becoming a teenager.
Which is, it's ironic because this was supposed to be catered towards younger kids.
Right, so I guess, but younger is catered. Like, they said, like, I watched it when I was 10, around 11, 12, I stopped. And that's probably about right, because that's what they cater to, is like the under 12 crowd. Once the Attitude Era catered towards the teenager guys in their 20s. That's
much like ECW did as well.
Right. What, like we talked about with the P jokes, like who finds that funny? 8-year-olds. That's who they're catering to now, or the under 12 crowd. And the under 12 crowd, they're not watching, and if you notice, the ratings go down through time. A 10-year-old, an 8-year-old might watch the first hour of Raw, then have to go to bed for school. And you can see that in the ratings. And the adults, the older people, they're just not watching.
So you mentioned the rewrite. Not surprised. I did not read that, but I know that happens pretty often, it seems like.
And the reason was when Vince McMahon got there, they were in Houston. George Bush had passed away. He is from that area. So he wanted a more upbeat Raw because he figured the fans would be somber. And that's why you saw a lot of faces go over, because he wanted the fans to have a feel-good night.
Okay, I guess, and I will say, he's been doing this for, 50 years, so he probably knows a lot better than you and I, types of stuff like that. That being said, there was some very curious storytelling and developments, and the one that I think drove me absolutely nuts should have been a major story, and it was sort of just, a very minor part of Raw. Drew McIntyre and Dolph Ziggler not only are no longer together, they're now against each other, and they had a match on Raw. It's hard to believe because these guys had been paired together since, I think, the night after WrestleMania. So we're talking 7 months together. They were a very dominant force, at times a tag team, at times two individual wrestlers, but they were always a group. Well, now they're split up. There wasn't a lot of explanation given to that. They did have a nice little exchange in the ring on the mic. But what ends up happening is it leads to a match that night, and Dolph Ziggler wins, albeit not clean, by pinfall over Drew McIntyre. And the reason why that's significant is because, at least by my recollection, it's the first time that McIntyre has been pinned or submitted since coming back to Raw, at least in a one-on-one match. So you have a lot of things happening that people don't even know are happening because they're not watching that Raw. How do you not make this a bigger deal and build that towards a pay-per-view match, even if you had to wait a couple more months to do so?
Because Vince and company don't see it as a big deal. I read.
Well, what do you think?
It should be a big deal. That is, I think I read that is his first pinfall loss on the main roster. The last time he lost was his last match in NXT,
which was 2017.
And to have Dolph Ziggler the one to beat him is iffy. But this is why I read it happen. I don't know if you saw this. One, Vince called for it because he doesn't like anyone to have an undefeated streak. So,
well, they weren't really talking up the undefeated streak.
True,
it was sort of like, it was more catering towards people like, wow, they're really pushing him and making him dominant.
He lost the undefeated streak where it was brought up to show. But so he did it for that, and he wanted to get a couple matches out of him and Ziggler. So to do that, Ziggler, I guess, had to at least win one. So now there's a reason for McIntyre to go back after him. You'll have a mini feud, and Drew will go over. And from it, all counts is, Ziggler. They don't see much in him. Once he's done with this feud, he's kind of going to be tossed aside again, like Ziggler gets tossed aside every other, couple months.
Wouldn't this be the time, though, because he was in great matches with Seth Rollins, he was in big feuds, you kind of ride that hot hand as long as you can, and then maybe the company eventually says, well, you've had a good run here, but it seems like they're not using the fact that he is a little bit hot, and they did push him. You have to capitalize on that. Now, if you have McIntyre beat him in the end to get McIntyre more over, I'm fine with that. But to have this match happen on Raw, it seems like just a waste. I mean, they could have spent weeks, maybe even months, building to this type of feud with them finally splitting up and creating some drama with it.
Well, if you wanted them to, why didn't you build it up a little bit? Then they could have their first match at TLC.
Instead, it's McIntyre and Finn, which now I'm more interested in seeing McIntyre and Ziggler.
Right, it makes no sense because now, again, you have McIntyre in two feuds: the feud with Ziggler, the feud with Finn. It doesn't, you could have just, McIntyre, Ziggler, and TLC. You could have probably taken it into the Rumble, then stopped it, and kind of start going towards what you want him to do for Mania,
which should be something pretty big, I think, right?
You would think, by all accounts, they're planning something big for him.
But we would have said that about Strowman last year.
Right, but could he be the one to dethrone Lesnar? I mean, he has the size. I mean, I would be okay with him being the one to beat Lesnar.
It's sort of a weird dynamic now because no matter what they say, Lesnar's always a heel to me. He's not a guy that fans will get behind. McIntyre seems like a great heel. So I don't know. There's also speculation Seth Rollins.
I mean,
but
quite honestly, I do not want to see Lesnar versus Strowman again at WrestleMania.
I
can
think,
tell you I don't want to see that.
Maybe Seth Rollins is that guy. Nonetheless, that's weeks or months in the future, and based on what you've said and what we've talked about, they can't even plan days in the future. So who knows what will happen between now and then. We talked a week ago about how weird Dean Ambrose's promo was in the doctor's office. He had another weird one, but this one I thought was a little bit cooler. I don't know. I mean, give me your thoughts, because it's sort of hard to gauge this. I like that they're doing something different with him, but it still doesn't feel like a Dean Ambrose type thing to me.
Man, I didn't know what to make of this. First off, it reminded me of Bane. So every time I'm seeing him, I'm just thinking of Dark Knight Rises. I don't know. I guess I give him credit for trying something different. I don't know if it completely works for me.
I feel the same way. I mean, it's different. You pay attention, and you're going to remember that look.
Right.
Will it continue beyond this week? I don't know. But it does feel like Ambrose should be coming across a little bit better than what he has been the last few weeks.
Honestly, I feel like the heel turn's been a failure so far. I'm just not feeling it. I don't know why, but I'm just not feeling it.
And we'll get into Daniel Bryan later. I would say he's a complete opposite, where it's a clear success in the early going that Daniel Bryan turned heel.
Yes.
There was, something else on Raw that, it gets, a minute match, but I think it was kind of interesting that they had the Heath Slater and Rhino split up, and, of course, making Corbin this evil GM, because they always have to have someone evil running Raw. He says, you guys are going to fight, the loser is fired. So you would think, again, much like we said with Ziggler and McIntyre, they would at least make this a little bit more significant than what it was. I mean, the guys, it was maybe 2 minutes at most, the match? Rhino loses, and now there's speculation that he really might be done with the company. There's also a thought that it's just a storyline, but he's at the point now in his career where I don't think anyone would be shocked if his days working are over. Slater and Rhino seem like guys that sort of epitomize the difference between how SmackDown uses its talent usually and how Raw uses its talent, because these guys, believe it or not, they were sort of a mismatched pairing. They were really popular on SmackDown, and I don't think anyone thought they were going to sustain that level of popularity or significance, but when was the last time they were even on Raw in a meaningful match? That makes it tough for people to care about this, even though, by the stakes of it, it should have been something notable.
I actually totally forgot that they were even on the roster.
I'm going to have to get you a roster for Christmas, Justin. You're forgetting a lot of guys on Raw.
I mean, who really do you think of Rhino and Slater? Do they cross your mind? They don't cross my mind.
Well, and that's the problem with them never being on TV.
Right.
I mean, those guys don't have to be winning matches or main eventing, but you should have those guys on at least, once every 3 weeks in some role?
You would think. Now, from what I read is, Rhino isn't leaving the company. It is storyline, because he's actually advertised for some tour coming up.
Well, they're in South America right now.
Yeah, he's advertised. I read that the rumor was that he's going to get a position as a coach down in NXT, and he's just transitioning into a different role. There's no use for him on the main roster or as an active wrestler, really. I mean, he's been around. He probably has some experience. Maybe he has some guidance to give these younger guys. But well, I mean, I don't think anyone's losing sleep that Rhino's career is over. Right.
That being said, I still think they're just not milking these matches or these storylines for what they could be, and it's missed opportunities. Why not, again, maybe make this stipulation a week or two ago, and then have the match have meaning, as opposed to throwing it all together in a span of half an hour?
Well, you could have did a couple week build up to it or something. At least give these guys a resemblance of a storyline,
so that the fans care when the match happens.
Right, and then you do have 3 hours to kill. It's not like you can't find time for these guys to have 5, 6, 7 minutes a show dedicated to this storyline.
Right, I agree. Those are the things that really stood out on Raw. That said, I thought it was a better show. That's not saying a lot. I don't think it was a good show, but I think it was a step in the right direction. That being said, you never know. It could be getting to that time of year now where the shows could be even worse upcoming because, a lot of the talent doesn't want to be working during the holidays.
Oh, I think December it's going to be friggin' brutal. I can't wait to see Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve ratings. I mean, granted, they're going to be holiday.
Are they taping?
Yes, they're
okay.
taping Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve show. The same with SmackDown. Christmas and New Year's Day SmackDowns are being taped. And I believe New Year's Day SmackDown's being taped in Pittsburgh on the 29th.
That's a great thing, honestly, because what they did last year, making Raw, the performers work live on Christmas.
That's a joke. That's pathetic.
Right, I agree. Let's transition over to SmackDown, and SmackDown to me was okay. Not as good as some weeks. There's some things that are annoying me about SmackDown as well, but I think the positives outweigh the negatives. I mentioned it before. Daniel Bryan, it's a different character for him, but what he's doing with his heel turn has really impressed me. He was on Miz TV and then later at commentary for the main event involving AJ Styles. And this guy, I mean, I don't think we would have seen this coming even, a month ago, but he's one of the best heels in the company right now, and he very quickly got the fans to kind of turn on him with how he's done it. There's not a lot of lingering people that are still trying to support him. They pretty much all hate him, and you feel like he believes what he's saying when he goes off on this basically, global warming tirade and everything. It's sort of a weird take, but I like it. I think he's doing great, and to me, this was much needed because the face Daniel Bryan we saw over the past 2 or 3 months was kind of boring. He was losing some steam.
I think maybe he realized that. I mean, we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Like, apparently he was the one who went to Vince and wanted to turn heel. Anyone familiar with his older work and Ring of Honor and stuff knows that he could be a very effective heel. And he's not trying to play the cool heel either. He's out there playing the genuine heel. I think you're correct. He believes what he's saying, and that's what makes good promos work, when the person believes in what they're saying. I mean, if you watch Total Bellas and stuff, Daniel Bryan's into the environment and stuff like that. So it's completely realistic that he's over there talking about global warming and we're idiots and this and that. I mean, it works. And he comes off like, I'm better than you. It just works. And
he only kicked one man in the groin one time, Justin.
That's it. I mean, I'm very interested to see if they can pull off the Miz face turn, and not like what they had when Miz was face years ago. That was pathetic. But like, pull it off to where Miz and Bryan could face each other like at WrestleMania for the title with a whole new dynamic.
I want to go back and reference a similar type of character that was an absolute flop, and times have changed, but I think this shows how good Daniel Bryan is at pulling it off. Do you remember an NXT character right when NXT started getting popular on the network who was like the environmentalist type of character? He's gone, and now he's a big international star over in Japan.
Yes. Hold on. Oh, crap. He came out with the signs, right?
Yes, I put you on the spot here, Justin.
What? Oh, I'm trying to think of his NXT name now. Yeah, oh, man. You're going to have to tell me. It's
C.J. Parker.
Thank you.
Now known as Juice Robinson. And that gimmick was a complete flop. They did the same thing. He was a good guy. They turned him heel by, being the environmentalist and being responsible and stuff like that. It was a dud. Daniel Bryan is making it work as the champion now, so credit goes out to him because you see that. I mean, we see with Bobby Lashley now. He's basically Lex Luger 1993 / Mark Jindrak 2002. They recycle this stuff, and it's up to the guys if they can pull it off or not.
Oh, they recycle a lot of things. What did I text you? It was Samoa Joe. With the Jeff Hardy stuff, because you're like, I love Joe. Joe's doing great. I go,
he's a great bartender.
I said, yeah, Joe's great, but I wonder what CM Punk thinks, because I'm pretty sure I saw the exact same storyline in 2011.
So that's a good transition, and I kind of set you up for it. Wanted to talk about Jeff Hardy on SmackDown. Him and Joe, I think, is very interesting, and Joe is much of a monster heel that he has been. He's so eloquent that he made that public service thing work for me. But that served as an interruption for Jeff Hardy's match against Randy Orton. And the fact that those two were wrestling again just drives me crazy. This is what Raw does that really irks me. Hardy and Orton should have had their feud ended in that incredible match inside the cell in, I think, October. They've since wrestled twice on SmackDown. And to me, the feud suffers. You don't have that same, I guess, blow-off type of match that makes you remember it as a great feud. They're just going to keep dragging it on. And now the matches are meaningless. And to me, it makes those prior matches less significant because we see it week in and week out. I don't understand why they couldn't just keep those guys separate for years, or at least, 6 to 8 months.
I agree, because the creative, they're just not good. They're just not good enough to come up
you
with
literally put Jeff Hardy against anyone other than Randy Orton, and I'm not going to feel that way.
Right, but that's just what they do. They don't come up with anything. That's why the product sucks.
Anything that you would have done different on SmackDown? Because, again, I know we said all the issues that Raw has. SmackDown, to me, is a much stronger show, and it's a lot harder to nitpick that show.
Yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying the Bryan AJ Styles stuff. And I love, right now, the women's division on SmackDown. I mean, anything Becky does right now, I am going to watch. Like, I purposely made sure, like, even if I flip off SmackDown for a second or two because there's a hockey game I want to watch or something, I pay attention to see when the women's segment comes on. They make me want to watch. I do recommend, though, not giving Asuka a mic. That's like the worst thing in the world.
I've always thought she needs to basically never speak, but when she does speak, keep it to like one sentence and have it have meaning.
Very right, and they have to teach her not to scream. I feel she starts screaming, and I'm not trying to rip because clearly English is not her, first language, and she's not very good at it. Shinsuke's way better at it, and that's okay. But they need to not because did you notice brought down the crowd? I think a little bit because they were they have to get really quiet because they're trying to listen and understand what she's saying, and
they're tempted to say what, but it's a face, so you don't want that reaction.
Right. Well, speaking of what, I love Daniel Bryan when the crowd was wanting him. His reaction to that, by the way.
He shut them up for the most part.
He shut them up pretty good with it. But yeah, the women's division, to me, that feud, Charlotte, Becky, Asuka, now whatever she's involved, best thing going in the company, whether it's Raw or SmackDown.
Is there anything that scares you about? Let me say this: they ruin a lot of momentum. They cost a lot of superstars, their potential chance to break through and become megastars. Is there anything this company can do that would mess up Becky Lynch? Because I feel like whether she loses the title or not, she's so popular, it's not really as long as they put her on TV in some capacity every week, winning or losing, she's going to be the most popular woman in the company.
I saw that her Rumble Access sold out in 90 seconds. So, I mean, she's kicking butt right now, no matter, men or women. I am a little nervous because she tweeted out before, they did not handpick her to be in this position. It wasn't hey, we're going to put a rocket ship on a Becky and, shoot her up like they did Charlotte and Roman. This was more they wanted her to be a heel. This was more of a surprise to them. Maybe not us, but a surprise to them. Ride it. For the love of God, ride it. I mean, ride it until WrestleMania, making her and Ronda, at WrestleMania. Becky deserves it. When was the last time a woman wrestler has been this hot? Right.
I mean, I would say Sasha and Charlotte had some incredible feuds on Raw, but it wasn't quite this level. I would say Sasha and Bayley in NXT was the last time that there was something this much buzz around women.
Okay, but that was NXT, which is completely different. The main roster-wise.
Right, I agree.
She is hot now. I do wonder if Asuka's been put in this match to actually win the title.
I thought about that, but I think they're still more likely to give it to Charlotte, to be honest.
Well, that would be a huge mistake. And that, again, that would show that they do not care what the crowd reaction is. They don't care if the wrestler took that brass ring. Vince McMahon likes to talk about it, run with it. Becky's done everything right in the last couple months. Whenever she's been given a little, an inch, she's taken a mile with it. How do you destroy that by giving the title back to Charlotte? It makes no sense to me, unless they have something else planned where she drops title and there's something
you speculated before, to get someone to challenge Ronda Rousey, they have to win the Royal Rumble. Becky Lynch can win the Royal Rumble if she's not champion.
True. So I guess in a triple threat, it's the easiest way, because this is what a TLC match, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, but they're not having, so it's not a ladder match, so the title's not like hanging above.
Yeah, the TLC concept is sort of confusing to me because it began as you had to grab the titles. Right. I think it's now just you have all those around the ring, right?
Makes, I think. I believe so. So theoretically, Asuka could pin Charlotte, become women's champion, which people are probably going to like, not really complain too much about it.
They would like it if Becky wasn't the one losing the title.
Right. But as long as Becky's not pinned, she's protected. She can then blame Charlotte, blah, 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 blah. And then the next pay-per-view is the Royal Rumble. She then re-enters the Royal Rumble, wins it, and then decides to go get Ronda Rousey. I mean, that makes them... That could work. I honestly... It could. I could live with
still have the Nia and Becky Lynch, and there's part of me that thinks they'll make that a WrestleMania match instead.
Real, I hope.
Not that I think that they should. They're just, the company says, we want Ronda and Charlotte. We're going to stick with that. We'll give Becky Lynch and Nia Jax.
I'm sorry. Charlotte and Ronda would be a great match, good match. But I think that all the work Becky's done to deserve that match, you just poo-pooed it.
But you could totally see the company going that route, right?
And Nia Jax doesn't deserve crap. Just because she screwed up and actually hurt Becky shouldn't be rewarded in a prominent WrestleMania match with that wrestler because she screwed up.
I agree with you. I'm just saying I could totally see this company doing that. That's just it.
And that's why they lose viewership and they lose fans.
Right. So we're talking WrestleMania. This is the last thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up this week. A little bit lighter in terms of the wrestling news. But, I'm personally affected by this, and I'm sure other people are. There's a change to WrestleMania weekend, and it was sort of late in the game. Now, I'm going to WrestleMania, but I'm also going to NXT. NXT, the last few years, has been the night before WrestleMania. Hall of Fame, which used to be Saturday night, got moved to Friday. So you have Hall of Fame, NXT, WrestleMania, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. A lot of people get those travel packages where all three are covered. They decided late in the game to switch up NXT and the Hall of Fame. It makes sense in one regard, and I'll let you kind of speak to this, Justin, because you know more about the independent wrestling scene. But this seems like, while it might make life a little more difficult for someone like me who already had some plans to go up there, this is going to benefit wrestling fans in general, isn't it?
Well, yeah, because Saturday night, isn't that the big Ring of Honor show? So, someone like you, I would, if I was you, okay, you could do, yeah, see, because the Hall of Fame, NXT is going to be Friday night.
A Hall of Fame, to me, it does not have the luster it once did.
I actually enjoy it. I agree with you. It does get very long. But me personally, I actually enjoy listening to stories from the wrestlers, the road stories. They just need to be told, you got 15 minutes, not 40 minutes.
Right. I mean, the Bushwhackers up there for half an hour, And
I remember when Lita, had to be carried off, and I like Lita, I respect Lita, but no one wants to hear anyone talk for 40 minutes.
That's what old-time wrestlers do their entire life, though, at this point, right?
Right. I think you need to be told once you get the call. Your speech, you get 15 minutes. Write a speech, make sure it's within 15 minutes.
And maybe the headliner gets...
And the headliner might get a half. Or maybe there's, depending on who you are, the celebrity person. Hey, you get 5 minutes. Nobody really wants to hear Kid Rock talk. You get 5 minutes, get the hell off the stage. Families that somebody gets put in who's passed away. Because I don't think Jim the Anvil Neidhart's in the Hall of Fame. Correct?
Well, I was going to say, I know we've sort of switched this to Hall of Fame debate as opposed to TakeOver, but who are going to be potential headliners this year? I know Owen Hart always comes up. I don't know that they're going to do that, but to me, there's not as big of a... They've put so many deserving guys in over the past half decade that there's not a ton of huge names to really draw from.
Two things. Well, one, the rumor is The Rock. Okay, this year The Rock's going to go, and if they can get him schedule-wise to show up, it's going to be The Rock. But why do they always have to put in 7 or 8 wrestlers? This is what I don't understand.
So that everyone that wrestled between 1985 and 1994 will get in.
Put it 4 or 5. And then, then if you gave them 20, 25 minutes each to talk with only 4 people, I can understand it, because then you're there 2.5 hours, 3 hours. Because when wrestlers are leaving before the main guy even goes on, first off, it's disrespectful to the wrestler, and it's a mockery of your show.
So, Hall of Fame aside, NXT's now Friday. So, theoretically, NXT gets its own spotlight, and then the G1 on Saturday. So, if you're a wrestling fan, especially because WrestleMania draws fans from not only all over the country, all over the world, you could theoretically catch all 3.
I do wonder, did they change that because they were worried actually about the audience for NXT being lower than normal?
I don't think that's a concern. I think NXT is going to sell out no matter what, to be honest.
But the NXT fans and the G1 fans, they're the same. That would have been interesting to me, because you would think the same people that go to the NXT show definitely want to go to that G1 show.
Right. I think they both would have sold out, but then you're splitting the audience, and there's probably a lot of people that are, have to pick one or the other.
I mean, like you said, the Hall of Fame gets drawn out. Well, great. You can see NXT, G1, then WrestleMania. That's a pretty damn good wrestling weekend.
So ultimately, you're in favor of this decision?
Oh, yes. I have no problem with it whatsoever. I like it. I can honestly say, I have no problem with it. It wasn't a big deal to me when I saw it. I went, okay, potato. Does it really matter? Works for me.
I talked to a certain WWE superstar about this, and the rationale, aside from avoiding conflict with the other promotion, is it gives, if you're strictly a WWE umbrella fan and you only watch that product and care about that product, and I would sort of fall under that to an extent, it gives you a day of breathing room, between NXT and WrestleMania. Whereas when you have them on back-to-back nights, it's almost an overload of wrestling, and you don't even really get to reset. Plus, NXT might overshadow WrestleMania. It's sort of done that with other shows. Yeah. So putting it on Friday, you get a killer show on Friday, then you get Saturday to kind of, kick your feet up, relax, and then you have to, get focused again for Sunday. It's a little mental break, much like how a wrestling show would have sort of a filler match between the 2 main event type of deals.
True. I mean, I would say almost every time NXT TakeOver goes on, I don't think the main card has ever done better than NXT, ever. I can't remember a pay-per-view that you could say, like, oh, that pay-per-view was definitely better than NXT TakeOver.
I would agree with that. That's about all I have. Anything else that you have that you want to add before we call this one quits?
Nope.
Justin, thank you again on short notice. You were the best. We will be back next week. We'll discuss some other things. Plus, I don't know when yet. We'll figure it out. But we, get excited for this one, are going to have some year-end awards we will hand out before 2018 comes.
Someone's been brainstorming.
Yes. I've talked to a lot of the listeners, and they have overwhelmingly requested year-end awards. So we will do that.
Understand it, baby.
Yes, absolutely. That'll be in a future upcoming episode of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. Again, to stay tuned with everything we do. You can follow us on Twitter, 5-Star Pod Wrestle. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all the old videos. For Justin Lowery, Sean Meyers signing off, saying thanks once again for tuning in to the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. We'll catch you next week.